Remember when fantasy football used to be fun?
This is the worst.
Welcome into the worst fantasy show. I am your host with the least, Jack Lucenay. We are here to lament or rejoice in what was a week of NFL action and a whole fuck ton of injuries. Here to lament with me and rejoice with me today is my good buddy Jay Wong.
I think I'm cute. I know I'm sexy. I've got the looks that drives a gold.
Welcome to the show, Jay.
Thanks. Thank you so much for having me.
So normally, Jay, you philander in the fantasy hockey world, but I've brought you over to the dark side. I had you fill in my main redraft league. So this is a league where the last place person gets banished, exiled for minimum 1 year. So you are replacing the exilee from last year, which was our co-commish and league treasurer. So all that falls on me this year, which is a pain in the ass.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Jack, if anything, I might be joining that relegation zone right this way, the way it's framing out so far.
I mean, I'm already staring down the barrel of 0-2 if Saquon can't pull off 25 points for me tonight. But we're going to get right into reacting to week 2 of NFL. We'll start very quickly. We always like to hold ourselves accountable on the show. What did we get wrong?
Knock, knock. Who's there?
Fuck off.
So what are a couple things you got wrong this week?
Man, I'm gonna pull up my team and even see the damage. Like the biggest one with football I'm finding is it's not so much I picked the wrong guy, but what do you do when your guy gets bent over, peeled over like a freshly minted banana peel? Like, what do you do? You know what I mean? Like, joints are not meant to go in those ways and fashions, and it's just you sit there. You see it live, and obviously Red Zone has to put it back over like in super slow motion again and again. And it's like, oh yeah, did that guy completely tear his leg in half? Like, I suppose so. Like, I don't even know. Like, if I was to say my biggest mistake was ending up somehow with the sun god himself pulling a solid 5 points. Like, how was I supposed to know that was sun god in week 1?
Yeah. I mean, he did much better in week 2, but then he was almost joining this list, unfortunately. So through 2 weeks, notable players injured. I'm just going to really rattle this off fast. Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, Debo Samuel, A.J. Brown, T. Higgins, Jordan Addison, Keenan Allen, Christian McCaffrey, Kenneth Walker, Isaiah Pacheco, Joe Mixon, Jordan Love, Tua Tagovailoa, Evan Ingram, Jake Ferguson, and David Njoku. Come on down. You're the next contestant on Everybody is Fucking Injured.
That is
Sorry there, I cut you off with the drop, Jay. You were saying something, though.
No, I was just saying that is such a strong fantasy lineup in its own solid right. And my goodness, every one of those joining the IR is a pitiful pain. My goodness. And I mean, first and foremost, too, like before anybody else, I want to say like that Tua situation, that's a toughie. I know it's basically his livelihood, right? But at the same time, like concussions and head injuries are difficult, especially wishing him the best in terms of recovery.
So, I mean, you talked about week 1. We're on week 2, but my first one I was wrong. And I think a lot of people were wrong about this, and it's through 2 weeks. Bro, the New Orleans Saints are the best team in football? What the fuck? what kind of upside down world are we living in? Derek Carr and Baker Mayfield right now are the top 2 fantasy quarterbacks. Like, what the fuck is going on? Sam Darnold, I really wasn't a believer in that. I did make $100 though, because someone bet me that he would have 40 pass attempts, and I was like, that's fucking crazy. There's no way. And he didn't come anywhere. He didn't sniff 40. He had like 26. He had a great game though. He's been impressive through 2 weeks. The first week I was like, yeah, but it's the fucking Giants. But against the Niners, I think there was definitely some revenge factor there of getting cut. My optimism for the Jaguars just overall has been crushed through 2 weeks, and I'm just almost completely out on this team. Also, to the point of someone asked me Jerome Ford or Travis Etienne on the Sunday Starts Sis show, and me and the guy were going back and forth in the chat. We both agreed Jerome Ford. Jerome Ford looked good, and then Cleveland just stopped giving him the ball, and they gave Deonta Foreman 14 carries for no fucking reason. DK Metcalf, I thought was a little bit of a fade because of Christian Gonzalez. No, he fucking went crazy. Now, I still started him because you start your studs, but I didn't expect him to have such a crazy game. And then the 2 guys that I actually did kind of shit on were Zay Flowers and Malik Neighbors, and they both had excellent games. So I kind of eaten some crow on all of that. But hey, we don't just have to beat ourselves up about what we got wrong. We did get some shit right.
What's the kind of person to say I told us so? But you know what? I told us so. I told us so.
So Jay, what are some of the things you got right this week?
I think you said it best, right? Like, Jack, like, start your studs. My goodness, if anyone remembers the dud of a line that I guess Harrison put in week 1, like, if you benched him, all those points and all that damage pretty much came in quarter 1. So that guy pretty much did, like 2 games worth of points in a first quarter. Like, at a certain point, you were wondering if this guy was going to buck like 50 points. You know what I mean? Like, it was getting nuts. But I mean, Harrison with what, four receptions, 130 yards. I think it was like 2 touchdowns. Like, this is exactly what people wanted, right? When they were drafting a high upside rookie.
This one in particular makes me laugh because of all the bullshit from Kyler Murray the week prior being like, it's not my job to get him the ball. Like, yeah, it is, bro. Actually, I hate to break it to you. You are the quarterback of the football team. Your only job, technically speaking, above all other jobs, is to throw the ball to the other players.
It's also one of those where if there was anything else I did wrong, Jack, it was the fact that we could only start 1 QB, and I ended up taking the double stack. So I stacked QBs and wide receivers, and I did that for wide receiver 1s, but I did this for 2 star wide receivers, right? Both for JJ and for Harrison, and I got both their QBs. So now I'm sitting here, and it doesn't matter which goddamn game it is. I'm still going to look there if it's the early Sunday match or the midday Sunday match, and I'm just going to think whenever that QB wide receiver stack doesn't work out, I'm just going to look on the other side forlornly and think, God damn it, if only I started the other side instead.
Yeah. I mean, so coming from the hockey world, I think that's the biggest difference in football is the finality of fantasy football is it all comes down. I was explaining this to my buddy because he it's the only league I'm in that's not on Sleeper. It's on Yahoo. I don't know what he fucked up setting up this league, but he had it set to capped at 5 moves a week. I was like, what the fuck is this, a hockey league? Oh. And I had to explain to him, and he was like, well, why wouldn't it be like every other sport? I was like, because it's one lineup, dude. Like, this isn't like every other sport. Like, it isn't like, because every other sport, it is you're putting guys in because they play every day and you can get a man game advantage. You can't do that in football. It's like if you play a guy on Thursday, the spot's filled, you're not filling that spot again. So it's one lineup. It's one and done. But because of that, it really is like the finality of the decisions, and you're like, oh, really overthinking and overstressing. Because like in hockey, it's like if I fuck up one night, whatever, that guy, I'll make it up the next night. Who gives a shit? It's very much shorter memory in those other sports, whereas like in football, it lingers with you, and you have to have the short memory, but it's so much harder in the football.
I find it so cruel. I find it so that when I make the right decision, that overwhelming sense of relief is nowhere near as soul crushing as that feeling when you see just like, a wide receiver 2 or 3 that, come on, I shouldn't have started. And he still ended up with 16 points. And you're like, how? Like, when did you receive these targets? And like, did you just like catch a solo bomb shot down the field? Like, and the thing is, even if I made the quote unquote right decision in the book, it doesn't mean I feel any fucking better when in actuality the points roll out and the things happen. And anywho, like the thing with fantasy football I'm finding very much as well is that every single small or minor decision that doesn't matter at all in the grand scheme of things for the football game has a huge impact on my fantasy scores. Like I distinctly remember thinking, man, these guys, like, I'm trying to remember which Bengal was the guy that caught the touchdown that got overturned afterwards.
Oh, the one I got. Oh, okay.
That was week
wasn't
one.
that the? Oh, in week one, that was I think it was the rookie Burton.
Oh, that sounds right. Yeah. But it's just something small like that, or even for example, like giving the goal line carry, just giving the goal line carry. Like Achan goes in, he gets stuffed, and it's like, okay, no worries. And then you look over and you're hoping to God Mostert gets like, a chance to get in there and, steal a carry and rush it in. Or Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs in the Detroit like backline. Just all those many things where at the end of the day, when I was watching football originally, I'm like, it doesn't matter. They got a touchdown. But oh fuck no, it does matter. Like I need Montgomery in there to punch it in, not Gibbs.
Now I tell you where I feel it even more because I'm starting to. I almost feel like a dejected sense of removal from like my regular fantasy teams now because of daily fantasy and best ball, which is like betting on the weekly and doing the weekly drafts. And I tell you, I hit on a lineup. I finished 6th on drafters, and I tell you, I wanted to fucking throttle somebody. And it's like the mood swings that come from it, my guy. I don't know how I'm gonna live past 40 anymore because, and when I tell you that I can come out from a fucking sleepy stupor on the couch, like I could be half in the bag, falling asleep into a deep nap, and I hear my player get a touchdown and like a long touchdown or something, and I come flying out of it like, yeah, like, oh my fuck. So this week for me, Alvin Kamara was that guy. I had him in like half of my lineups for my
I
best
faced
ball
him.
that was a crazy one.
This
Kamara is
week.
like, it was so weird because it was like, if really, I just was like, if it turns into a weird high scoring matchup between the Saints and the Cowboys, it's going to be a lot of Kamara. And that was my reasoning to why I had him in so much of my DFS and best ball lineups. But I didn't expect that game. Like when that happens, though, you're like, oh shit. But I also had Chris Godwin was the other one. I had Godwin everywhere because I watched Cooper Kupp cut the shit out of the Lions out of the slot. I was like, oh, well, Chris Godwin does exactly that. And they played him 75% out of the slot in the game. So it was just even that much better. And Gardner Minshew, someone asked me on the Sunday live show, over under 20 completions for Minshew. And I was like, ooh, that's a tough one. But I ended up going over, and he definitely hit that over in the crazy overtime win. He had like 21 even when they were still losing, though, because there was a lot of short stuff to Devontae and Brock Bowers. But I was like, between them, he should get there. But those are probably my best calls. But speaking of best calls, hold that thought because we are about to get into the hearts. All right, Jay. So I'm going to rattle these ones off for you. These are basically your top 10 quarterbacks. I want you to just give me your thoughts. All right. So I think number one was your guy, Kyler Murray. And then we had Derek Carr, Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones, Geno Smith, just like everyone predicted. And then Mahomes, Lamar, Baker, Dak, and Burrow round out your top 10. So give me some thoughts here, Jay. What are you thinking?
I mean, we listen to some of those guys on the other pods as well, right? For fantasy football. And I do agree with the idea that the guys who have the ability to enter, not just partake in the passing game, but also enter the run game are just the ones that like they are the crazy spikes, right? The same way I guess you see certain players can absolutely dominate, just like running backs. Running backs are probably unique in that way, right? Where they can just cradle the rock and then pound the rock in that, like, so much as they just get them by themselves. If your quarterback has the legs to do so, then that's going to be the one. So in my mind, when I see a guy like, I don't know, like a guy, for example, like Sam Darnold, he's got the best wide receiver in the game. And so there is that aspect where he can just chuck it down the field, and Lord knows JJ's gonna be there somewhere. Like as long as you hoof it, I'll make it there somewhere. But it's different compared to a guy like Kyler Murray. Like in my mind, as long as you have a guy that can run himself out of problems and get himself into those positions on his own 2 feet, I'm way more. Maybe I'm just way more into the Anthony Richardson, Kyler Murray type of quarterback, or the new kind of quarterback, more so than anything else.
So it's funny that you say that because I think that you have to be in this modern age of the NFL. And I kind of tweeted about this earlier, and it's like, again, real football collides with fantasy football is my running theme of the year. That if you just look at real football, it's easier to predict fantasy football. And because I think what a lot of people end up doing is wish casting and over projecting in fantasy football is what happens more often than not. Because we just mentioned Sam Darnold, all right, and how Sam Darnold is, 2 really great weeks, top 5 fantasy quarterback for those 2 weeks, right? Let me read you off these stats for this top 5 quarterback, okay? Week 1, he had 19 completions from 24 attempts for 208 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. All right. This past week, and that was good enough for QB 14. This past week, QB 3, completed 17 of 26 for 268 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, and he ran 5 times for 32 yards. So it's like the scoring right now is extremely depressed, it feels like, for quarterbacks. And by the flip, we're seeing a lot of running backs get a lot of work early. And I think it's like, oh, well, why is that happening? It's really obvious. It's the stupid kickoff rule. So this new kickoff rule is actually ruining fantasy football and offensive football. It's the opposite effect of what they intended. So if you think about it, first of all, they're kicking the ball off, and one of 2 things is happening. Either the team gets a decent return, right? But that also then means you're working with a shorter field, less yards theoretically for the offense, right? Even if it's a touchback, because of the new rules, it goes up to the 30. It's not at the 20 anymore. So their teams aren't starting as far back as they used to. A lot of times, if you got a penalty, especially on the kickoff, you were starting from the 10. You had 90 yards to go to the end zone. Now you've only got 70, maybe 60, 50. Like, so the yards are depressed and the scoring is depressed because the way the defenses are responding is, well, if we are dealing with shorter fields, like let's just play cover two and keep everything in front of us and just let them do their dink and dunk short passes, force field goals and turnovers, and we're good. We'll keep the scoring down. And that's exactly what the fuck is happening. And we've seen it through 2 weeks of football now. So I would start really tempering my expectations for, how many guys can eat in passing games. If the new norm now for the number 3 fantasy quarterback is 268 fucking yards. Like, bro, 120 of those went to Justin Jefferson, and that means the rest of the entire team had to split 140. Like, what the fuck? So to me, that's telling me, A, that even in the best passing offenses, there's really only going to be room for one, maybe two guys. And that B, in the bad passing offenses, yeet those fucking guys out the window because they're going to be just abjectly horrible and useless for your fantasy team. Like, I'm going to be putting out maybe some trade stuff soon, but one of my things is going to be I'm going to be trying to trade all my wide receivers away for all these bum ass teams and trying to just get any fucking running backs I can because that's what teams are doing. They're just leaning on the running backs.
And I guess to build on that further, I guess it further heightens the ability, not the ability, but it further heightens the disparity between, I guess, yardage for yardage sake and also the final touchdown carrier reception, because it used to be, you could get just, like a solid amount of yardage and that could contribute just with, especially in like a PPR league. But
Garbage time.
but now it's heightened with the fewer yards available, than the person and the receiver or the running back that actually finishes and gets the job done and gets the rock into the zone is going to be so much more valuable in a very heightened and dramatic way.
This year is going to be something else, especially now with all the rash of injuries that we've seen. And it's like, usually it's the running backs that get dinged, but the wide receivers are falling like flies too. So for the running backs, let's transition here. The running backs, Alvin Kamara, Super Camaro, obviously the number one running back on the week. And I actually think this makes him the number one running back on the year because he had a pretty decent week one also. James Cook and Devon Achane from Thursday night both rocked out. JK Two Legs flipped into the end zone and was told, don't fucking do that again, bro. Come on. Like, you have a career of injury. It was the GM too told him legitimately, like, no more flips. Brees Hall, James Conner, Braylon Allen, shocking name here, going to come up later in the show. Jordan Mason still made his way into the top 10. Brian Robinson, that was another good call that I had. I actually had him in some DFS lineups to try and differentiate myself. Derrick Henry found the end zone again. That's, touchdown a week, keeps the doctor away and the fantasy haters away. And then kind of some bonus guys here who were still serviceable. Jonathan Taylor, Ramondre Stevenson, Josh Jacobs had all the yards but no touchdowns. Charbonnet found the end zone, and both Gibbs and Montgomery again found the end zone. So I think the reason we're seeing so many running backs pop up and be extremely useful, I think Alvin Kamara is the one that when people were like, oh, this is a thing that always happens where like an extremely talented player like Alvin Kamara, Devontae Adams is like 29 years old and people want to declare his career over. And I'm like, that's not how it works. They're still extremely talented football players. They might not do it every single game, but Kamara looks like he's found the fountain of youth. But are there any names here that really pop out to you that you really wanted to talk about?
Honestly, The tough part as well is there are so many of these names where you're realizing they definitely did not get drafted with the expectation of such heavy usage and weight. I mean, let's be real here. James Cook, obviously we knew he was going to be, like the back in Buffalo. I just didn't realize when we said the back that we are no longer even going to attempt Josh Allen picking up and throwing into a couple of the receivers even. We're just going to literally have Josh Allen hand the rock to you over and over and over and have you run 2 to 3 downs each time and hope to God you do something with it. If that was the case, there's no way James Cook was going to be taken that low compared to, he was getting taken maybe 3rd round? Like he was not, lower. I don't like lower even. That is insanity.
Yeah.
Like Josh Allen finished with 9 points and in a blowout win in week 2. Like this is, I don't know if James Cook's body can even sustain this sort of usage, honestly. It was week 2.
It definitely can. So I've been super in on James Cook. Like I was the James Cook guy. The only player I draft, like the only running back I drafted more than Saquon Barkley, who I had an insane amount of shares of, was James Cook. And it was because to me, it was just so obvious of like, yeah, this is what Joe Brady does. Like they're going to run the ball 30 times a game and let Josh Allen play hero ball around it and play good defense. Like that's literally what the head coach wants to do. That's what the offensive coordinator does. And it kind of works for the team when they have no fucking wide receivers. I was like, again, the wish casting that people have of like, oh, Keon Coleman is just going to step in and replace Stephon Diggs. Like, yeah, okay. No, you know what that's like saying? That is like saying, and to put this in hockey terms for you hockey fans out there, it's like saying, oh yeah, Connor Bedard's just going to step in and be Connor McDavid year 1. Like, that's not how it fucking works. Like, these guys take time to develop, even when they're like really good. Like, so that one was just funny to me, but I always projected James Cook to basically be the focus of this offense. So yeah, I have like literally like over 40% of him in best ball and a shit ton of them on all my redraft and dynasty teams. Like James Cook is the running back I would say I'm the most overweight on, and the second one is Saquon. And that was because and I kind of did the same thing with DeAndre Swift when he went to the Eagles. And I just was like, well, the Eagles offensive line is so good that just whoever's the starting running back that has a minimum amount of talent, I want him on my team. And so when they were like, oh, we got Saquon, I was like, oh, well, he has maximum talent. So I definitely want him on my team. Yeah, anything else about the running backs, or should we move on to wide receiver here?
I mean, we got to mention, like, Jordan Mason. What the hell was that CMC news? Like, he's been given what, at least 7 months to recover from the Super Bowl? Like, that's the last real football CMC's, played competitively, right? You're telling me this guy might not play. They were saying what, 4 weeks, I think, 6 weeks. Like it is comfortably like 40%, if not more, of the season. Like what a steal. Holy shit.
Okay, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And the Christian McCaffrey thing, it's like, I feel like I don't have a ton of Jordan Mason, but I have almost no McCaffrey. Like, right. I have McCaffrey on like, I think like one startup dynasty team that I did. And I was like, it's like where I took him, I can take the hit. But I have almost none of him in best ball. And I think that's more just because I didn't get the 101 that many times. And even when I did, I just differentiated. It's like, yeah, for every 3 times I got the 101, I took McCaffrey one of those 3 times, because for me it was like I either took McCaffrey or I took Tyreek or I took Lamb, and it just depended on how did I feel that day and what kind of build did I want to do. So it was like, but it was, and then even sometimes I was really fucking, if I was feeling real spicy, there were some days where I took Bijan, because that was kind of my preseason thing of like I was saying, like it's not what has happened, it's what will happen. And I think Bijan finishes number one. And now that McCaffrey's hurt, that's actually real potential. We'll see, especially in the back half of the season when their schedule lightens up and if Kirk Cousins can get going. But yeah, I mean, shout out to everyone who was able to pick up Jordan Mason because you know what this is like in a slightly different way? It's when Le'Veon Bell sat out and everyone who got James Conner and thought it was like a 2-week rental and then ended up having him for the season. Like, it's kind of like this because it's like you thought Mason was going to be maybe a 1 or 2 week rental, and now all of a sudden people are talking about Achilles tendonitis that shit can linger and go on for a season, and who knows, maybe you got him for a whole season.
And people are even talking about picking up Garendo as like a safety insurance market. And you're sitting there going, come on, guys. Like, this is the consensus 101 we're talking about here. And we're talking about his backup needing to be backed up just in case as insurance. Like, holy shit. Why did the news not come out like 3 weeks ago?
I'm not gonna lie, there is one deep league where I was a little bit overreactionary, and I went and added Garendo to my roster, but then I didn't like it's because I think I dropped Charbonnet for him, and I was like, that was stupid, don't do that. And then I immediately I like put in a waiver claim to make sure I got Charbonnet back on my team. And that ended up looking smart because, Charbonnet fucking started a game. And even though he hasn't looked the best, he kind of looks like, he kind of looks like Brandon Jacobs from Once Upon a Time. But he got in the end zone. That's all that matters. All right, let's move into the wide receivers. Marvin Harrison Jr. rocked it. DK Metcalf, boom. Justin Jefferson, and also relief to the Justin Jefferson owners. Apparently, he is day to day, so he should be fine. He's not going to miss like extended time like a lot of these other guys because I saw the play where he got hurt. It was such a bullshit. It honestly looked like a cheap shot on what was a running play where they kind of saw Jefferson in a blocking position and they went for his knee. And I was like, that's some bullshit. Calvin Ridley had a good game. Malik Neighbors balled out. Chris Godwin, Nico Collins. Nico Collins was the one that pushed me into 6th place on drafters in the one contest I was in. Rashid Shaheed, Devontae Adams, CeeDee Lamb, and then kind of in honorable mentions, Quentin Johnson, JSN I had to put on the list. JSN with a massive comeback in the bet that I have going with my guy HoopTube, Vlad McConkey versus JSN. Week 1, I was winning, and now week 2, JSN took a substantial lead. So that's not looking good for me. And then Zay Flowers, Rashee Rice, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Also, Amon-Ra supposedly survived injury. He is like hurt as in sore, but not injured as in going to miss games, is what I heard. And Deebo Samuel will miss games, for fuck's sakes. Another one that's popped up on the injury report now. He's going to miss several weeks, according to Kyle Shanahan. Fuck. So wide receivers, how are we feeling here?
It's like, obviously the thing with wide receivers is once they perform on a week-to-week basis, it's like, oh yeah, it's amazing. But I mean, at the same time, like Marvin Harrison Jr., absolute fucking dud in week 1. DK Metcalf was super quiet in week 1. JJ got his points. Like, he got probably like what 1 touchdown. Like, but the general gist is when wide receivers have their big weeks, I think just the same as we shouldn't overreact to a quiet week with a wide receiver. There's no need to, sail to the moon and be like, oh my God, like this is the next, next greatest thing since sliced bread. The reality is there's going to need to be a guy that finishes in the end zone. And that's why these guys get and command the top capital, right? Like, have you seen them? They're basically gazelles. Like, they don't get hit and on the same way the running backs do. But I just want to say I didn't expect this coming into the season, and it's tied to the tight ends a little bit. But Rice listed at the very end, like these Kansas City Chiefs aren't playing some of the best football I'm seeing out there, and they're still 2-0. And this is in line together with Kelsey, who was commanding what, like 3rd round, 4th round draft capital. Dude's put up what, 5 points, if even, combined over 2 weeks. All those passes, slot runs, and everything's just really going to Rashee Rice. He was honestly drafted so far down. Like, I feel like you get to scroll so far just to like remember, oh yeah, this guy's around. I think Rice owners are laughing all the way to the bank. I think he's going to be the steal. Like, and especially going back with RBs as well. Like, we didn't talk about him because I guess he had a good week, but it wasn't Alvin Kamara good. Isaiah Pacheco is on crutches, right?
Yeah,
like that
too.
Yeah, like he's not going to be playing for the next 4 to 5 weeks of, fantasy football relevance, at least.
Yeah. That's another crushing one. Oh my God.
That lineup, like if this means that Travis Kelce ends up getting like, a couple more targets, okay. I am honestly just thinking that it just means more.
They're probably going to have
runs.
to pass more because they just aren't going to have a running back now.
Or it just means, like, come on, do we really think Samaje Perine is the guy to get? Like, he's probably available at all the waiver wires.
They'll give him gross work. They'll give CEH work. They're annoying like that. Speaking of annoying, let's actually just smash through the tight ends because I really just want to start to get negative here. George Kittle, Hunter Henry, and Trey McBride are your top 3. Brock Bowers had an amazing game. And then it was all the elite tight ends that we predicted, like Mike Gesicki, Jonnu Smith, Elijah Higgins, Zach Ertz, Brenton Strange. Y'all need a little Strange in your life. And Luke Schoonmaker. And then Mark Andrews had his most relevant game, all of 7 fucking points. And then your top 5 defense, just to round out the hearts here so we can just get negative. We had the Bills, the Texans, the Cardinals, the Vikings, and the Steelers. Let's hit the drop and get into the farts.
Man, don't bullshit me. Bullshit. 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 Bullshit.
Bullshit. You said so. It's all bullshit.
All right, Jay, let's start with the quarterbacks. We had the guys that got 10 to 15-ish points, so they didn't kill you, but they didn't have great weeks. You had C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Jared Goff, Brock Purdy-licious, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Gardner Minshew, Josh Allen, like you mentioned before, it was all James Cook. Bo Nix, hilariously, in this list. Jaden Daniels. And this was the under 10 club that really killed you. Tua got hurt. Caleb Williams sucked. Matt Stafford sucked more. That was a very popular streaming play. And he had all of 2.5 fantasy points. He is an abject disaster for fantasy, and it is not his fault at all. His wide receivers, dead. Offensive line, dead. Running backs, mid. Defense, half dead also. So the only players in playing worse than those quarterbacks is Bryce Young. Is there anything we need to talk about here, Jay?
I mean, again, the thing at the end is if you were rostering some of, I guess, especially like the last 2 names, like Tua, geez,
I have Bryce Young. I'm going to out myself here. I was a believer in the Bryce Young comeback and such a soft believer at that. Like, I was like, yeah, Dave Canales is a good coach. They drafted a number 1 wide receiver, theoretically speaking. They drafted a number 1 running back, theoretically speaking, even though he's on PUP and we'll come back later. And they drafted a number 1 tight end, theoretically speaking. They added to the offensive line. They added Deontay Johnson. Like, they did all the things. And Bryce Young looks like he could not hit the broadside of a barn door if it was 2 feet in front of his fucking face.
The thing is, too, you mentioned it when you mentioned Stafford as well, but to some degree, you're only as good as your pocket permits. And if your pocket is just doing its rendition of Swiss cheese, play in, play out, Lord knows, like there's only so much you can hear Bo Nix sacked over and over in the same tone. And it's just like you look at Bryce as well, and who's he got in terms of like targets? Like, are we really believing in like a 33-year-old Adam Thielen to be that difference maker for him? Like, you need a guy where no matter what, you scan down the field in like the 2 seconds you got and you just target. You target a run, you target a hit over and over and over and over. You build trust. Who's Bryce Young got? Like
Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen, by the way, wide fucking open. There's a play where Adam Thielen's literally running an inside post route. He does his job. He is wide fucking open, my guy. I'm telling you, there is not anyone within 5 yards of Adam Thielen, and he's 20 yards downfield. And Bryce Young fucking doesn't see it, doesn't come close to seeing it, can't read the field. It's like Adam Thielen doesn't exist. He's running wind sprints out here at 33. Bro, Andy, watch Adam Thielen's about to fucking blow the fuck up because now they've announced Andy Dalton's going to be the starter. That's how bad Bryce Young is. They're going to play the former Andy Dalton at like the peak of his career was the prime meridian of NFL quarterbacks, where if your NFL quarterback was worse than Andy Dalton, then you had to replace them because they were not a franchise quarterback. But if they were better than Andy Dalton, you maybe had a shot.
And I think the tough part as well is that when we think about, I guess, replaceable quarterbacks, non-replaceable quarterbacks, obviously there are some quarterbacks where I think they're very good at slotting plays. They're almost, I guess, in some ways, ideal backup quarterbacks, right? That you can plug them into a lineup. They'll do a serviceable job for a set amount of time. It's just weird when I'm looking at the list of farts to see some of these bona fide stud quarterbacks almost be played and schemed as if they were just these untrustworthy plug and play backups. Like, I'm still blown away by seeing Josh Allen hand the ball over and over night in, night out. It was almost like that season where he had like the injury and you kind of knew he wasn't 100%, but they were willing to chip shot their way to 16-10 wins night in, night out. And you kind of sit there going, dude, bud, this is after a full healthy off season. This is week 2. What the hell are you doing? Like, you throw the damn ball.
Trevor Lawrence looks like ass, and he's like one of the highest on this list.
He's that one stat going in, I think 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter was insane. It was something like they had 138 yards combined of offense with 3 points to show for it. And they had 75 yards in the final last drive. And you sit there going, what were you goddamn doing all night? What the hell were you doing?
All right, before we move on, the only guy I actually did not put on this list was Deshaun Watson, because if you're still starting Deshaun Watson in fantasy, you're fucking doing it to yourself. Like, you are spreading the legs apart and then punching yourself in the balls over and over again. So I'm not putting him on the fart list. You should know better. For running backs, though, I was really surprised that Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren couldn't get going a little more against the Denver Broncos defense. Maybe they have bowed up a little bit since last season. Najee, though, would be a trade target for me because he had 20 carries week 1, 17 carries week 2, and that's not going to change. That's it. He's going to be one of the few running backs that gets like 300 carries, and he always gets better in the second half of the season. The fact that he's getting so much work now, it just bodes well for later on. But Jerome Ford, I kind of talked about it earlier. He was doing really well, had like a 30-yard run, and then they just stopped giving it to him. Gus Bus kind of rusted, ceding a lot of work to J.K. Dobbins. He had 17 carries, but it just was kind of meh. Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon got hurt. That's another one that sucks. And if he misses time, there's going to be some hot pickups down in Houston. Zamir White officially dead. That's not a thing. Oh my God. I'm so sorry for you fucking zero running back drafters that took Zamir White and DeAndre Swift, because Jesus Christ, DeAndre Swift looks like ass too. Khalil Herbert looks better than DeAndre Swift. Like, I feel like he's going to take that job eventually. Zach Moss and Chase Brown, turns out, guess what? They're not as good as Joe Mixon. Kyron Williams found the end zone, but still kind of had a shitty game. I would actually be trying to trade for Kyron and Corum. Like, if you can get Corum, especially off waivers, because he was dropped in so many places and could still get dropped this week, if that happens, I would pick him up and then actively try to trade for Kyron, because especially now they have no fucking wide receivers, you would expect they'd have to lean on these running backs even more. So that's kind of going to be a trade target for me. And then Zeke and Rachaad White also, I think, I didn't fully get the part. I think he got hurt. He definitely didn't have a good game. If he misses time, Bucky Irving, who I picked up last week in a couple leagues, going to be a huge target for waiver wires. Anything there sparking your interest?
Yeah, I definitely have shares of Rachaad White, and oh my goodness, that Q is brutal. Like, you see that Q tag and you just don't know. Like, for the longest time, even what Isaiah Pacheco was listed as, like, questionable. And then you see that and you're like, yeah, that's questionable, but it's not questionable to return. It's questionable if he's, like, he's going to be walking out of the stadium. That setup with Kyron, I completely agree. And in a similar vein, I think it was confusing with Jerome Ford as well. I don't really like, what was Cleveland doing offensively, because Ford wasn't getting snaps. And I also have shares of Amari Cooper, and dude wasn't getting any targets. And then
Actually,
also,
I gotta cut you off there. Amari Cooper is actually 8th in the NFL in targets. Did you know that? He has 17 targets through 2 weeks.
and
He's just
doing
not
nothing with
catching
it.
any of them.
That's insane. Oh,
Yeah, I
he
know,
was
right?
schemed out.
I knew I had to say that, because I'm like, yeah, no, he's got a shit ton of targets, my guy. Yo, okay. I shared the meme in the group where in the league. So in
That's
Megala Bowl,
insane.
bro, and I feel so stupid, okay? In Megala Bowl, I shared the Interstellar meme. If you're not familiar with the Interstellar meme, Interstellar is the movie with Matthew McConaughey, and there's a part, basically he like sends himself in space, and there's a part where he can see himself about to go to space. He's like banging on the window, being like, "Don't go, please, God, don't go, don't do it, man." So it's like he's watching himself make the mistake in the past. And me and Megalobol, I went real running back heavy. But by the end of the draft, I realized I only took like 2 good wide receivers, and like I think Lad McConkey was my wide receiver 3. I was like, ooh, kind of fucked up a little bit. I had running backs literally falling out of my ears. I had Saquon, Ramondre, Tony Pollard, James Conner. So I was like, someone offered me Amari Cooper for James Conner. This was before week 1 was even played. I was like, shit. Amari Cooper was like a 5th round pick. James Conner, I got him a little bit later. It's good value. I need kind of a good wide receiver 3 that can pop off sometimes. A guy who could see a lot of targets. He's seeing the targets. That's not the fucking problem. The problem is Voldemort's throwing the goddamn ball.
Butterfingers?
Oh my god. And he's dropped touchdowns in back-to-back weeks. He just looks dejected. And I think part of it is playing with Deshaun Watson. I just don't think anyone on the team likes him. I don't think Amari Cooper likes him. I think that actually matters for NFL football. Like, the fact that he doesn't like his quarterback, and just if he was willing to run through a brick wall for Deshaun Watson, you bet your ass he would be fucking going up for some contested catches, not fucking up normal, dropped passes like that. Like, Jameis Winston takes over. This is going to be a game changer for Amari Cooper. But until
Absolutely.
such time, I And what sucks is I'm going to say let him ride the bench, and then the moment you fucking do that, he's going to go for 200 yards. It's such bullshit.
I mean, Amari Cooper, I think this was like going back to the past 2 seasons as well, but I'm pretty sure he was one of the heaviest targeted and also most consistent first wide receivers on NFL rosters. But I mean, he kind of plays in like a Rust Belt city. He doesn't play like, the most dramatic, flary game. Like he's not the highlight reel guy, but he's the consistent first down. Maybe this is an overreaction and just a complaint of frustration. But yeah, like this is really sucky is what it is to see Amari Cooper doing, well, non-Amari Cooper type things. And it's just...
It's funny because when he was with the Raiders way back when he was a rookie, it was the lack of consistency that everyone lamented because he would go for 200 yards and then do nothing for 3 games. And, he finally got over that. And it's like now it feels like we've regressed back to that point because of fucking Deshaun Watson and all this bullshit.
Like Amari Cooper, correct me if I'm wrong, but Amari Cooper was basically what I guess the Dallas Cowboys gave up, right? To open up space for CeeDee Lamb to become that sort of...
No, actually it was worse than that. So it was so they could sign Zeke. They basically had to decide between Amari Cooper and Zeke, and they made the wrong choice.
Oh my goodness.
Imagine, because see, again, this is exactly why I wanted you on the show, Jay, so that you could react in real time to, understanding that. And we got a question in the chat. Let's stop off here before we get to the wide receivers. Pareko in the chat wants to know, sell high on Malik Neighbors for Mike Evans. I would not sell high on Malik Neighbors only because Neighbors is fucking killing it. Even as bad as Daniel Jones might be, Neighbors just saw like a crazy amount of targets. I think it was like 17 targets or something like that. And I love Mike Evans. I'm definitely going to be trying to trade for Mike Evans. I'll be targeting the Buccaneers wide receivers. Godwin's going to be a lot harder to peel off of someone right now. But Mike Evans, after kind of a slow first week, but it was 2 touchdowns, and then kind of a quiet week 2, you might be able to get him from someone. That's a move I would make, but not for Neighbors. And then shout out Jerry Bagshaw, just says hello. But yeah, we were talking about wide receivers. Let's list off the ones that disappointed us. DJ Moore, Garrett Wilson, Demarcus Robinson, Brandon Ayuk, Cooper Kupp, injured. Stephon Diggs, Mike Evans, aforementioned, Jamar Chase is going through his training camp, except it's in the regular season. Jaden Reed, Tyreek Hill, Terry McLaurin. That's one. Terry McLaurin, I'm done with him right now until like week 8 when Jaden Daniels figures out how to run an offense and not just run. And Jacoby Myers, George Pickens, Michael Pittman, Ladd McConkey, Xavier Worthy, Cortland Sutton, if you played him, any Panthers wide receiver, put his name on the list. I put Ladd McConkey just to out myself. Amari Cooper, we already kind of talked about. Tyler Lockett, just feels like him and JSN are going to flip weeks, which is going to be annoying. Tank Dell, still not a thing. Unfortunately, he's taken a back seat to Nico Collins, 1, and then Stephon Diggs, 2. And then DeAndre Hopkins, Curtis Samuel, and Christian Kirk also. So a lot of wide receivers disappointed, and then a lot of them got hurt. So again, I think the fact that passing is down across the board is really affecting the wide receivers. And then when you combine that with the injuries to some of the top guys, like we've seen AJ Brown out tonight for Monday Night Football also, it's an unmitigated disaster for a lot of these wide receivers right now. And a lot of these are, highly drafted wide receivers when you're talking about DJ Moore, Garrett Wilson, Brandon Ayuk, Cooper Kupp, especially like those guys. And the guys I think I'm really worried about, like I look at Garrett Wilson, I look at Michael Pittman, I mentioned Terry McLaurin. We talked about Amari Cooper. These are the wide receiver ones for their teams and are generally talented wide receivers, but their quarterbacks are doing them no fucking favors.
And I think it's almost like two problems that I'm thinking and like seeing over here with all these lists of players is you have one, which is like DJ Moore. Like that talent is unquestionable.
10
But the
targets.
problem is a rookie quarterback can go one of two ways. You can go the way of, it's escaping me right now, CJ Stroud, right? Like a rookie quarterback comes into the league and dude looks like he's 102 years old with his zen and experience and wisdom and poise on the field. And then you have Caleb Williams. And you hoped that Caleb Williams coming in was going to display that same prowess. They faced off last night and it didn't look close. It's basically what the big general gist was. If you're the wide receiver attached to that quarterback that is constantly, like digging himself and scrambling out of the pocket, you're just not going to get fed enough to that degree. And DJ Moore still pulled what was it, 11 points last night. Like he's getting the touches and he's making do with what he's getting. He's just not getting fed enough for him to be that sort of destructive power that he is. And then you look at other quarterbacks, and the other problem is not the inexperience, so to speak, but a quarterback that can run themselves out of trouble is more likely to do so and not destabilize, but devolve to just relying on the legs if they don't trust the pocket and get out of it instead of scrambling a pass forward. And that's what I think of when I think of like Pittman. Like that's his issue, right? Like you end up with Richardson, who is so run happy. Like if anything, I'm kind of scared for Richardson holders here, where we saw what happened with Tua. I'm not saying Richardson the same build. He's like 6'4", 6'5". He's a specimen in a unit that can carry his weight himself.
Last year, though, for the same reason as he got injured. So I totally understand exactly what you're saying.
The other issue is you end up with quarterbacks that just have such a plethora of options. There's just so many weapons. And some of these names that are listed here, right? Like they're not on the same level of disappointment, right? Like you list Diggs and you list Dell and you list Nico Collins. And if you had put this in week 1, different names would have popped up as the disappointments. But that's the problem. It's a great problem to have for Houston. Funny enough, I guess Houston is the place you call for problems, right? So Houston, we've got a problem, is a fantasy problem, not so much an actual team issue. But Lord, like Nico Collins got 30 points last night. All those scores meant that goddamn other wide receivers were just, high stepping in and excitement on the side. That's all they can really do. They're not going to get anything for you on the board. So don't be disappointed in Tank Dell, because next week in week 3, like that could be Tank Dell tearing it up. That honestly could just be him rotating through. Diggs got a couple touchdowns, or maybe at least one touchdown in week 1. Two touchdowns in week 1. That, holy smokes, that could be like the name escapes me, but like their tight end could be the one that receives the line. Sorry,
Dalton Schultz.
Dalton Schultz could be the guy receiving all the targets in week 4. Like the name of the game is just that no matter what, CJ Stroud is going to be just awash with like touchdowns left, right, and center. Mixon's going to get into the mix there and he's going to punch in a few as well. Like it's just there's too many options. And when you have those kinds of offenses, who's going to score? Nobody knows, but you only have 2 wide receivers to start. Like it's like, that's the other issue with the other type of quarterback. The first one is your quarterback's just, not up to par. Not up to par in the sense that maybe their legs are too good or their poise is not great. And the other one is if they are just so good, but your team is so oiled together, holy shit, I don't know which wide receiver is going to show up that week. I kind of just want a JJ that's going to receive the lion's share, like 60, 70% of targets and roll with that, that sort of deal.
Well, for so long, It's been about consolidation of targets, passing volume, and relying on targets, receptions, and yards as opposed to touchdowns because touchdowns are so fluky. Uh, but as we talked about kind of earlier in the show, if all of the passing yards are depressed, if the amount of attempts and completions are down because those are turned into rushing attempts for the running backs, then yeah, like it's going to obviously naturally affect the wide receivers. And, I think with Houston, however, I will say that Nico Collins has clearly established himself as the one. And I think the guys that are going to flip kind of week in and week out, it's going to be Diggs and Tank Dell because it's just going to be which one has the touchdown play or the couple touchdown plays. And Nico, even week one, had at least 5 for 100 on 8 targets, and then this week it was 8 for 100 and a tutty. So it's like you'll see that with the wide receiver one on a team like Nico Collins has established himself to be. You mentioned Justin Jefferson. Those kind of guys will still exist, but where we used to be able to eat so easily off the wide receiver twos and even wide receiver threes, that may not be as viable this season as just honestly relying on running backs. Like we'll get into some names shortly here, but like some of these running backs, honestly, on the waiver list, I would start over some of the more generic wide receiver plays. But before we can get there, we got to stop off at the grossest position of them all, the tight ends. I did not even write a name down. This is what I'm going to tell you guys. This is what I put. The only tight ends to score more than 7 fantasy points, we already said all of their names. They were on the heart list. That means any tight end that was not on that list earlier in the show had less than 7 fantasy points. So put a fucking name there. Travis Kelce, dud. Sam Laporta, dud. Dalton Kincaid, dud. What the fuck is going on with
Isaiah Likely got all those receptions and all those yards in week one? Nothing.
I dropped 69 fab on him in a league where I needed the tight end. And it ended up, not only did I think I needed the tight end, it turns out I needed the tight end even more than I thought because Evan Ingram ended up being fucking out. So it was like, it ended up being like, it was one of those things where I was like, I think this is a really viable flex play and one of the best players that's going to be available on waivers this year. I'm going to do a fab dump for him in this league because he's available. I did that having Evan Ingram on my team. Then Evan Ingram goes out. I'm like, oh my fuck, thank God I got Isaiah Likely on this. Oh, doesn't matter. I was like, oh, thank you, Isaiah Likely. And Isaiah Likely said,
go fuck yourself.
Oh, man.
So tight ends. You want to talk about tight ends?
It's also brutal in the sense that any person who ended up thinking they got a onesie set up with Mahomes and a Kelce stack, I'm sorry. Like, I truly do believe that Travis Kelce is going to not just turn this around, but be a decisive player in the inevitable Kansas City Chiefs playoff run / Super Bowl, triple, what do you call it? Like three-peat winning run. He is by all definition, like by every definition, he is the Gronk to Brady, or I guess he's the Gronk to Mahomes as Gronk himself was to Brady. So he's going to come back, he's going to do and get all those receptions and all those things and get targeted and make the runs and get in the slant. But he's not going to do it now. Dude, he's like 34 years old. Dude's going to save his legs and save his energy and all that stuff. He's going to run a couple feints. They're going to throw Rice in the slot. It's disappointing is what it is. And I feel bad, truthfully, as a fantasy manager that has honestly, in some leagues gotten shares of Travis Kelce and at that sort of not at a depressed fantasy capital draft round either. Like, it feels bad. you put him out there and you honestly kind of feel like, shit, I might as well have just saved the draft capital and just punted tight ends to the end because nobody's got anything going in that position anyway.
Yeah, I mean, the only one really, and even his week one wasn't the greatest. Trey McBride, I think, out of all the elite tight ends, is the only one that you're like kind of okay with because like his week one wasn't that bad. I mean, George Kittle too, also. Week one wasn't horrible, but again, for a tight end, it's like if he had 8 points, his week wasn't terrible. But it's like, oh man, yeah, it's so funny because I feel like again, there's two things that happen every year for fantasy football. Is just the pendulum that swings back and forth. Every year by about this time of year, week 2 or 3, there's like a rash of injuries, and we're like, this is the worst year for injuries in the history of fantasy football because they play on this shit ass turf still. So that's the one thing that happens. And then the other thing that happens, I feel like just year in and year out, the tight end class is deeper than it's ever been. The tight end class for fantasy football is deeper than it's ever been. And the next thing we know, we have some strange in the fucking top 10. Like, it's just bullshit, man.
And it's insane because I don't know if I've remembered week 2 being this dearthy, if that makes sense. Like normally what happens is there are unexpected characters that roll up, but do we have characters that truly just disappear? Like we're talking about Isaiah Likely still finishing as the number 1 tight end across 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, because, his week one was so
His
big.
week 1 was that good.
Oh, my God. Ugh, yeah, it's tight ends, man. What can I tell you? Before we get into the last segment of the show here, just quickly, the defenses that let you down. The Dallas Cowboys got fucking destroyed. Indianapolis Colts were a popular streamer. Malik Willis still was under 125 passing yards, which I had as a prop bet. But he actually didn't look horrible, and they won the game. So Colts defense kind of sucked. Both the Giants and Commanders. I saw people trying to galaxy brain that. In my personal history, anytime I see two shitty ass teams playing each other, no matter how bad the defenses are, they usually kind of like out suck each other into like putting up enough points that like neither of them are serviceable for fantasy. So that's what happened here. And then the Seahawks, I had them as a streamer because Patriots won a game with only 16 points. But even though the Seahawks won that game, it was like 23-20. They did. It wasn't bad. They had 10 points, but it was like there were better plays. But yeah, speaking of better plays, because we're gonna fucking need them this week. My God, with all the injuries. Let's quickly get into some waivers before we get out of here.
The fuck? The fuck? The fuck is in the air. The fuck? There's white shit everywhere. The fuck? I must be fucking baked and this shit's probably fake. The fucking hell did I just take? The fuck?
Jay, save us with some waiver wire cornerback.
I mean, like it really depends how desperate people are going and what's available. Like, I mean, assuming if you're in a super flex, these guys might be gone already. But I mean, I'm pleasantly surprised by the New England Patriots. Like Mac Jones is, doing some work.
It's Jacoby Brissett is starting for the Patriots right now. Mac Jones is gone. He's the backup for the Jaguars now.
Oh shit. My goodness. All right. I guess we'll start obviously with Derek Carr, right? Like check him out first. He's honestly, I don't know if we expect the Saints to continue being an offensive juggernaut like this. Like, mind you, I don't even think the Saints are necessarily just like leveling beatdowns on opponents. You know what I mean? Like they're contested matches. You know what I mean? Like they are just completely blowing the scoring out of the water. It's not like their defense is holding, like opponents to 10 points and under every night either. But
the Panthers, but the Cowboys were able to get. I think the Cowboys did end up with like 20-ish points.
Right. But I mean, like we'll see how the Saints end up going. Derek Carr, this definitely seems like a hot start and a half.
I would ride the hot hand with Derek Carr for sure. In single quarterback leagues like Derek Carr, Baker Mayfield might even still be floating out there. Those are kind of the guys. Like I'm avoiding at this point Matt Stafford. If I have him, I would drop him for either of these guys. He's going to have no wide receivers anymore. But you mentioned Superflex. Hilariously, I have Mac Jones on this list because to me, I'm in Superflex league. I'm targeting high value backups. So, Malik Willis was very surprising and has a starting job for as long as Jordan Love is injured. If you just need a direct, I want to have a quarterback on my roster that I can at least think about playing, I would consider him because he looked better for Green Bay than I expected and he runs. So he gets you those cheap running points. But the guys I really wanted to mention quickly was Nick Mullins, Sam Howell, and Mac Jones. In that order, if I'm in a deep enough Superflex leagues, I want all three of those guys rostered just because Nick Mullins, if anything happens to Sam Darnold, I think he is the easiest path to starting because as much as I think, Sam Darnold is a nice story, I also think he kind of has the least amount of rope in terms of if he just becomes an abject disaster all of a sudden and they need to switch to Nick Mullins, they will. He could not that he will, but he could in theory lose his job to just bad play.
Right.
Also injuries and everything like that, but I'm just saying when I look at who has a path to starting, and then Sam Howell, to me, I think a little harder of a path of Geno just being bad, especially because Geno just looked pretty good against the Patriots. But again, that's more of an injury one. And then the way I've seen Trevor Lawrence look, my God, Mac Jones, yeah, I would roster him at this point, especially if I was the Trevor Lawrence manager. Again, these are super flex ads only. We can get into some running backs. You got any running back names for us?
I think that Samaje Perine mention in terms of running backs is an interesting one, especially given that there is another, right? There is another running back that was getting at least getting snaps.
Okay. So hilariously for Kansas City historically, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is one of the biggest busts that exists for fantasy football because when he came out, he was actually a pretty high draft pick for the Kansas City Chiefs. There were people legitimately picking him over Jonathan Taylor in rookie dynasty drafts once upon a time. Taking CEH in the first round, again, very high above a lot of other valuable players. And he has been an abject, unmitigated disaster for fantasy football. The first year was and then since then it's been flatline. I can't do it because my throat is all fucked up, but he's still on that roster and still pops up like a fucking zombie out of the grave every now and again to steal work from viable backups that we think could be flex plays when the main running back goes down. But the man you're thinking of was actually Carson Steele, who is actually their fullback, technically speaking, but plays some running back as well.
And supposedly, not only did he also, quote unquote, play some positions as the running back, Carson Steele supposedly was the back that ended up with more snaps and touches once, crucially, Pacheco went off, which meant if they are going to gun along the side of handing snaps over to the trusted Perine or giving it up and just letting Steele, I guess, take and pound the rock down as the rookie and get some experience buffed in, I guess Kansas City is gonna give Steele some snaps to see what goes on. I mean, really, what they're really going to do is just hand the ball to Rice more often. But a man can dream. Maybe it's Carson Steele.
I actually think Worthy is the one that could see some more jet sweeps and that kind of stuff out of the backfield. But Rice will get involved on some of that. I think they'll mix up both of them. To me, though, I mean, Steele got work because it was in the middle of the game, and P. Ryan is still relatively new. I do think like through a week of preparation that P. Ryan's going to get named as the starter here. But I think that's a bit of fool's gold. He's not the one I'm going to be prioritizing on waivers here. Though the one I'm going to actually be going hard in the paint after a really hilarious name. Cam Akers, I can't believe is escaping my lips. But he's been the RB2 in Houston. And Joe Mixon is hurt. When Joe Mixon went out, Cam came in, had 7 for 32 and a catch and a reception. So he's getting work. Dameon Pierce is banged up too. I don't know.
But how many seasons in a row are we going to mention Cam Akers' name as the man that's going to roll through and get a chance again?
But I'm telling you, it's crazy, but he's already doing it. And I'm just saying, the way they run the ball in Houston, if Joe Mixon is out, Dameon Pierce is still a little nicked up. I'm telling you, Cam Akers is going to have a game next week, and everyone's going to freak out about it. Bucky Irving is another one that I'm prioritizing. We talked about Rachaad White. If he misses any kind of time, the receptions that Bucky Irving is going to get, I would actually prioritize. I think Bucky Irving is going to be my number one ad in any leagues that I don't already have him. And actually, the second guy that I'm going to be adding above even Akers and P. Ryan and some of these other guys, like if you want to talk about Khalil Herbert, Deontay Foreman, that was the one that was very annoying for Jerome Ford. They cut him, brought him back to practice squad, elevated him, and all of a sudden he gets 14 touches in the game. And if he gets any kind of red zone work, and Nick Chubb's definitely still missing at least another 4 weeks, like Foreman's going to be annoying and involved. He should be at least owned somewhere in deeper leagues. Ray Davis and then Blake Corum, if he hits waivers, he should be grabbed too. But the guy I left off there because I want to talk about him, Braylon Allen. Holy fuck. Braylon Allen for the Jets, I think, is going to be a real viable flex play. And this is going to be touchdown vulture city. You are going to be hoping that he gets in for the touchdowns. That's where he's going to get work, is around the goal line, because he's just a big, thick boy. But it also makes sense of like if Breece Hall breaks one and goes down within the 5-yard line and needs a breather, hey, send in Braylon Allen, run some people over for the easy touchdown. And God forbid anything happens to Breece, Braylon immediately steps into being an RB1. He is absolutely must own. He is probably the one I'm going to be going hardest in the paint after this week, besides Bucky Irving. Because I feel like in deeper leagues, you can take the shot on the lottery ticket that he finds end zone. But again, if anything happens to Breece, God forbid, knock on wood, I don't wish it on anyone, but with what we've seen this year, Braylon Allen absolutely needs to be owned.
Now, I guess the one question when it comes to RBs and waivers that is worthwhile to muse about is, just as you mentioned that the QBs who can't get the ball to their wide receivers ones included, they really, really affect and I guess can really hamper, I guess, fantasy performance in lineups. What do you feel about RB1s, and not RB1s obviously on the bona fide talented lineups, but the RB1s on the shitty ass lineups? Would you still think there's huge waiver potential and value to an RB1, that gets a ton of work, so to speak, but the team might not snag as many yards? It's on their legs, truthfully, to gain yardage.
Oh, 100%. Like, to put this in perspective too, so let's just say that I am a team that has a lot of wide receivers that are really fucking me over right now. Like, let's just say I somehow drafted like Cooper Kupp and Terry McLaurin and DJ Moore are like all on. Those are my 3 wide receivers mainly. Like, I'm in full panic mode. And if this is a league where I only have to start 2 wide receivers, so this is again very like a roster construction thing for me of like, I want to, in wherever I've got flex spots is what I'm getting at. I want to be starting running backs. And there's a lot of leagues out there that have 2 wide receiver slots and 2 flex slots. So in that situation, it's like, okay, well, I could start 4 running backs a week as opposed to having to put wide receivers there. Like, I can have 2 running backs and 2 running backs. Like, yeah, I could do 2 wide receivers. You can split it up however you want. But again, when I now know what I know about how much more the consistency I'm getting out of the running backs, even the running back 2 in a lot of places, because the way that the teams are running the ball this year, which is so crazy, like literally running the ball 30 times a game split between 2 guys, like 10 carries in an NFL game is totally viable for fantasy, like as a flex spot, because if they get in the end zone, all of a sudden now that's double-digit points.
Yeah, I was gonna say as well too. It also depends if your team, or I guess it depends on your league, where it depends also with the new rules if your team does like returning yards or whatnot as well.
Yeah, so Scott Fishbowl historically hasn't done it, but this year they have return yards and they're super juiced. So, like, I have Jaquan Jackson, who no one's ever heard of, and he got me like 15 fantasy points just off his return yards. But we're running long here. I want to smash through the rest of these waivers so we can all go watch some Monday Night Football, which is going to be kicking off in just a few minutes here. So I'm just going to really quick fire. Wide receivers: Quentin Johnson, Alec Pierce, Josh Reynolds, Jalen Tolbert, Jalen Naylor, Yoshibas, DeAndre Carter, and Scott Fishbowl only. That is a deeper ad. For tight end, Hunter Henry definitely needs to be owned. He had 100 yards and a shit ton of receptions and targets. Mike Gesicki, definitely also vacuum target vacuum right now. Schoonmaker, the big Schoon, replacing Jake Ferguson right now while he's dealing with his knee issues. Saw 6 targets and caught all 6 of them. In tight end premium leagues, he's worth an ad. Scott Fishbowl, for example. And the bones of Zach Ertz are still out here getting it done somehow. If you're really desperate or in a tight end premium league, like I mentioned, you can add him. And then lastly, but not leastly, the defense. Tampa Bay is going to get Denver at home. Las Vegas Raiders are going to get the Panthers at home. The Packers are going to get Will Levis and the Titans on the road, and the Chargers are going to get my Steelers, who can barely score a touchdown on the road. So between wide receiver, tight end, and defense, Jay, you want to throw anything at us for some quick waivers before we sign off here?
Somehow, somewhere, if you could still sneak Taysom Hill, grab that man for that juicy upside. But he's been pretty disappointing so far.
He has been disappointing, and he's also hurt now. He's banged up, so we'll see if he ends up missing some time. That name might end up having to be Jawan Johnson, who was supposed to miss the beginning of the season, and now he's back somehow. So I don't know what the fuck's going on there. But Jay, we super appreciate you coming on the show. We had a fucking blast. I appreciate everybody out there watching, anybody that watches between now and Thursday, which is when we will be back with all of our matchups for week 3, as well as our streamers. But until the next time, enjoy Monday Night Football, and I'll catch all of you guys on the flip side.
He's running down the middle by the 50. He's at the 30. He's bare-chested and banging his chest. Now he runs the opposite way. He runs at the 50. He runs at the 40. The guy is drunk, but there he goes. The 20. They're chasing him. They're not going to get him. Waving his arms, bare-chested. Somebody stop that man. Here comes